Storage Sync Service. A service in Azure that helps to synchronize files between an on-premises file server and Azure file shares. Azure File Sync Group. A logical grouping of servers in the Azure File Sync service that can share file data between them. Deploy an Azure File Sync storage service. Need to create a sync group. There can only be one cloud endpoint per sync group. Install the agent on the server. Add a server endpoint. Cloud shares sync down once every 24 hours. The on-premise is automatically sent up. Storage account naming convention. The naming rules and restrictions for storage accounts in Azure. Log Analytics. A service in Azure that collects and analyzes log data from multiple sources to give you operational insights and alerts. Workspace. A container in Log Analytics where data is collected, analyzed, and visualized. Sample Azure Policy. A policy definition in Azure that enforces compliance with a set of rules and standards. Scale Set. A group of virtual machines in Azure that can automatically scale out or in based on demand. AZVMSS. Azure Virtual Machine Scale Set. A feature in Azure that allows you to create and manage a group of identical virtual machines. Gateway Subnet. A subnet in an Azure virtual network that is reserved for virtual network gateway resources. Port 3389, 80, 443, 445. Well-known port numbers in the Internet Protocol used by network services and applications. IP forwarding. A feature in Azure that allows network traffic to be forwarded from one network interface to another. Recovery Services Vault. An Azure storage account used for backing up and recovering data. Dependent Resources. A resource in Azure that depends on another resource for its configuration or operation. App Service Plan Tiers. The pricing tiers for Azure App Service, which determine the performance and capacity of the service. Free tier runs for 60 minutes. Shared runs for 240 minutes. Basic runs continuously. D1 doesn't have connectivity. Scale out to B1 pricing doesn't work. Scale out, enable autoscale. Scaling can be done based on metrics. Linux Diagnostic Extension. An extension in Azure that provides diagnostic information and performance metrics for Linux virtual machines. Azure HD Insight. A service in Azure that provides managed Hadoop clusters for big data processing and analysis. Azure VM Sizes. The different sizes available for Azure virtual machines, each with different CPU, memory, and storage capabilities. Azure Content Delivery Network. A global content delivery network in Azure that enables efficient delivery of content to users. Application Gateway. A service in Azure that provides load balancing, secure web application access, and traffic management. Requires its own subnet. Collects total requests, failed requests, current connections, healthy host count, response status, throughput, unhealthy host count. TXT records. DNS records that provide text-based information about a domain, such as SPF and DMARC records. MX. Mail exchange. A type of DNS record that specifies the mail servers for a domain. SOA. Start of authority. A type of DNS record that specifies the authoritative information about a domain. NS. Name server. A type of DNS record that specifies the DNS servers responsible for a domain. Azure AD Connect. A tool in Azure that synchronizes on-premises Active Directory with Azure Active Directory. PowerShell CMD let used to manually start a synchronization cycle for Azure AD Connect, used for synchronizing identities between on-premises and cloud environments. Start Add Sync Sync SIL Policy Type Delta. Start Add Sync Sync SIL Policy Type Initial. The enterprise admin accounts are used for configuring your on-premise Active Directory, not the domain admin. Staging mode has to be disabled for password sync to work, as the hash sync is disabled when it's enabled. Single sign-on. A feature in Azure that enables users to sign in to multiple applications with one set of credentials. Managed Service Identity. A feature in Azure Active Directory, AD, that enables Azure services to use an automatically managed identity to access resources in Azure.